Hey everybody, hope you had a great weekend. Great to have you along here. Hockey Night Online. David Amber and of course CBC Sports senior writer Mike Brophy joins us as well. You had a good weekend?
Oh, very good, David.
Yeah? You had fun?
My wife and I moved last week. I'm exhausted. My fingernails even hurt.
Come on, all right. Well, I understand what that's like. Well, we're going to move on to the playoff scene in about a week from now, so there's plenty to talk about as far as the National Hockey League is concerned. You want to reach out to Bro, if you want to reach out to me, you want to reach out to Hockey Night in Canada, here's the way to do it on Twitter, at Hockey Night, you're looking good, Bro, at David Amber, at Hockey Bro, hashtag Hockey Night, also on Facebook. You can always find us there. Just 3 games on tap tonight. They're all pretty relevant. One to mention, though, Calgary at New Jersey. New Jersey 3 points behind Columbus for that 8th and final playoff spot in the East. We'll get to that in just a matter of moments, but we got to start with the big disciplinary news. In case you missed it, Zach Rinaldo, the Flyers, a 4-0 lead against the Sabres. Look at this hit on Chad Ruweddle right there. Boom, to the head on the right side of your screen. Ruweddle leaves with a concussion. Rinaldo kicked out of the game. Has a disciplinary phone hearing today with Brendan Shanahan.
You know what, Dave? I'm going to go against the grain on this one. And I think everybody has to be responsible for what they do on the ice. But if I'm Zach Rinaldo and I'm sitting down before Brendan Shanahan, I say, wait a minute. I did not target his head. When he took the shot, he leaned into me, and I was leading with my shoulder. Because he leaned into me, I hit with the elbow. We have the benefit of watching these hits in super slow motion, and they always look worse than when you watch them in real time. Now, again, at the end of the day, obviously headshots are an epidemic in the NHL. Maybe I exaggerate a little bit because they've cracked down on them. But
yeah.
And Ronaldo is a guy who has a history of doing bad things. On this one, I've got to sympathize just a little bit with him. Does he get a suspension? He probably will, because the NHL has to make a statement. Quite frankly, I think the fact that he was kicked out of the game might be punishment enough.
I generally agree with everything you say. This is the exception, though. I wouldn't call that vicious. I would call that unnecessary. Yeah. 4-0 lead, defenseless guy coming through with his shot. You don't need to hit him at all. I mean, you can brush by him. You don't need to lean in on him. And as you mentioned, he is a repeat offender. 2 years ago, suspended for an illegal hit, also fined for another illegal hit. So we're talking a 3rd time facing discipline from the league. What are you expecting to happen here?
I think he will get a suspension because of his history. But again, and I'm not defending Zach Rinaldo to a degree, I guess I am a little bit. I just think that the shooter is leaning forward and leans into the hit as much as Ronaldo hit him.
Yeah, made himself vulnerable. That's very true. We'll find out what Brendan Shanahan and the league say. I wonder if his past history will play a role. The fact that there's a concussion might play a role. We'll find out later today. Keep it locked, cbcsports.ca. This man will be all over it, as he always is. Meanwhile, we talked about the Eastern Conference standings. Let's start there, because before we get to your questions, this is what they wanted when they created this whole wild card situation. Conceivably, Washington, Toronto, New Jersey, all in the running. They've got a lot of work to do. New Jersey tonight, they essentially have to run the table. Toronto, they need to run the table and have a ton of work to do. They screwed things up with that loss Saturday on Hockey Night in Canada, which leads us to our first question. And it comes courtesy of Dingars. Dingars? Could that be right? I don't know. Can I say that on air? I just did. Look, what the heck happened to the Leafs? That's my question, because I can't figure it out.
Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh, I was at the game Saturday night, and there you are with a chance against the Winnipeg Jets, who are already out of the playoffs with nothing to play for, and they couldn't come up with a winning effort. I think a couple things are in play here, and obviously when the season's over, we'll do a further analysis of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think the bottom line with this group is there was no commitment to playing defense. David, you know as well as anybody, defense wins in the NHL. You have to be solid defensively to win in this league, and the Leafs made no commitment, in spite of Randy Carlyle, the coach, pleading and pleading and pleading with his group. You know, the loss of Jonathan Bernier really hurt the hockey team. I think James Reimer goes in there and gives you his best effort. James Reimer right now is completely out of sync, out of whack. I think he lacks confidence. And when your goaltender lacks confidence, your group lacks confidence. I thought Reimer played okay Saturday night. Okay is not good enough to make the playoffs in the position the Maple Leafs are in. They needed a goaltender to steal the game. He wasn't able to do that. Finally, I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, and David, I look at leadership or a lack thereof. I don't think this team has a leader. After the game, Dion Phaneuf was asked if the opposition outplayed his team. He said no. I would think...
Was he watching the same game you and I were watching?
Well, I mean, some of his teammates, Bozak, Boland, after the game, admitted, yes, we were outplayed by the Winnipeg Jets. They have no... David Clarkson was supposed to come to town and be a leader. We all know his season got off to a horrible start with the 10-game suspension. He never really fit in with the group. He's tried. Give him credit. He's tried. But this group lacks a leader.
Let this marinate for a minute here. Saturday night, the Leafs allowed 40-plus shots for the 22nd time this year. That's all you need to know. That's not defense. That's getting outplayed. That's giving up way too many chances. You're not going to play winning hockey giving up that many shots, which brings us to our next question, still with the Leafs. And this is interesting. The Canucks involved here as well. Should Randy Carlyle and John Tortorella switch jobs? They might be better suited in the other city. That coming from 70s Flyers fan.
I'm not really sure where 70s Flyer fan is going with this. I think
confusing.
that, I think both men are going to sit back and evaluate their own performance as well as their team's performance when this year is done. Whether either of them returns to the bench of their respective teams remains to be seen. I would say that Carlyle could be in a little bit of trouble, only because the president of the hockey team is a demanding guy who may want to bring his own people in. Tortorella, with his contract situation, it's very difficult to imagine him being let go in Vancouver. But at the end of the day, I think you look at these two teams, and as much as you might want to blame the coaches, you've got to address the personnel on the hockey team. I look at the Vancouver Canucks, their goaltending has become an issue. They went from a year ago having two guys fighting out for number one to now having a real question mark where that's concerned. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs, as I said earlier, they need some leadership. They need a stay-at-home tough defenseman. And they need depth on the third and fourth line. The Vancouver Canucks, again, probably need some defensive help, and they need some depth up front. So do they switch teams? I don't think that's going to happen, and I think both men could be in a little bit of trouble after this season.
That's pretty funny, switching coaches, which we saw, of course, the Rangers and the Canucks do. It's worked out a bit so far for the Rangers, not so much for Vancouver. In fact, the bottom four teams in the Western Conference standings, Bro, the four Canadian teams. Unbelievable to see it, but Winnipeg, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton taking up the back. All right, another question courtesy of Facebook. So pumped about these Habs. Of course, they're the one nice Canadian storyline. They're on a roll. Stanley Cup champs? Kurt Ben wants to know that. A lot of people want to know that, and I threw that out to you last time. They remind me a little bit of that 93 team. I think you marked that they don't have necessarily as much leadership as many veteran players, but when you look overall at that team, riding a hot goalie, they seem to have the hockey gods on their side. They have balanced scoring, a little bit like 93, the last time we saw a Canadian team hoist the cup.
Well, I think Marc Bergevin, since he went in as the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, has really got this franchise moving in the right direction. The first thing he did was address the toughness issue. They became a much tougher hockey team. Obviously, the goaltending, as you said, David, is there. They've got one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League. They play a very good team defensive game. They have a commitment. And you know what? People point to the Montreal Canadiens' lack of size up front. And you know what? You can't argue with that. They do have a little bit of a lack of size, but do they play scared? I don't think they play scared.
Gallagher plays like he's 230 pounds.
Every team in the NHL would love to have Gallagher on their hockey team, and then you point to the addition of Thomas Vanek. I don't know what's going to happen in the future with Thomas Vanek, whether he's going to the Minnesota Wild, but you know what? For this year, it doesn't matter. He's gone to Montreal. He's given them an extra scoring weapon. He's given them some veteran leadership. So, he's just a great pickup for the Montreal Canadiens. I'm not going to say that they're going to win a Stanley Cup because, quite frankly, they're eighth overall in the NHL. I would put the 7 teams ahead of them as better favorites to win the Cup, and the team that's behind them, the LA Kings, I think has a better chance to win the Cup. But in the Eastern Conference, the Montreal Canadiens are a team that I think could challenge the Boston Bruins. Obviously, it's going to be either Montreal or Pittsburgh, in my view, that's going to challenge the Boston Bruins. Wouldn't it be amazing to see a Boston-Montreal Eastern Conference final?
Wow. Well, it couldn't be because of the divisional setup. They would have to meet in the second round, but still, to have those two teams meet. Let me quickly follow up there. We don't have that much time, but I want to know, what do you think Montreal learned from last year's playoff exit, courtesy of the Ottawa Senators, that maybe would help them in a 7-game series going up against Tampa?
Well, I think so many teams in history, you can point to the fact that they had a failure before they moved on. I just think their younger players now have that taste of playoff experience. And it's funny, fans always say, why don't teams bottom out and get the higher draft pick versus working so hard to get to the playoffs and then get eliminated in one round? It's that playoff experience. That's why general managers want to get their group into the playoffs, because that playoff experience is so valuable to a group moving forward. Montreal Canadiens are much better prepared this year for the postseason.
They could be a sleeper in the East. I also like the Philadelphia Flyers. I've said that a few times. Meanwhile, out West, you pointed to the LA Kings. That's another team low in the standings, but remember what they can do. Here are your standings. As I mentioned, look at those 4 Canadian teams taking up the back end of the wild card chase, which is essentially down to 3 teams. Phoenix, Dallas, Minnesota. In fact, you could pretty much lock Minnesota in there. Dallas and Phoenix, they play on the final night of the regular season. Who do you like in that battle?
Oh boy, that's a real coin toss. Quite frankly, I like Dallas because of the goaltending. And I think you've got to have the goaltending, and Dallas just has an edge. I like their second half, but
you mean with Mike Smith being banged up and injured?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But if if it comes down to Phoenix making it, they're a good hockey team too, so it remains a real coin toss.
And Dave Tippett's one of the great coaches in the National Hockey League, gets the most out of his team. One final question we had for you on Hockey Night Online: Are they Blackhawks built for a repeat championship like the '97-'98 Wings, the Penguins, and the Oilers? Are they built for that championship? Ian Berg wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the health of Taves and Kane, whether or not those guys can come back. But when I look at the Chicago Blackhawks, I just see so much to like about this group. They've got great star power. They've got solid depth. They've got great coaching. They've got goaltending. They have all the elements that you could ask for in a championship team. And David, I've said this before, there are very few teams in the NHL that come playoff time can walk over to the wall and flick that button and turn things on. But certainly the Chicago Blackhawks are one of those teams. If Taves and Kane don't come back at 100%, it all changes because of how tough the Western Conference is. But if they come back and they're rested, hey, they're pretty prominent players at the Olympics. If they come back and they're rested, I like Chicago Blackhawks.
What I love about that team is they can beat you on defense, they can beat you in a 2-1 grinded out game, or they can open things up and beat you 5-4. And that's not, a lot of teams can't say that. There's one style they can play, and that's what they're comfortable with. They'll play any way you want.
And Joel Quenneville knows that, so he coaches depending on the opposition. And the other thing I like about the Blackhawks, and I've said this repeatedly, is that, hey, you look at Taves and Kane, yes, they're superstars. Marian Hossa. Nobody ever talks about Marian Hossa. Yeah. He's a top 10 player in the NHL, and he's a great playoff performer, in my view.
Yeah, they've got 4 arguably of the top 10 players in the league. When you throw Duncan Keith into the mix as well, they're pretty darn good. Now, we got one more question. I lied before. We have one more, and this one is courtesy of Amir Budali. He wants to know, I think the Kings can win it all. Who's with me? I guess that should be a question mark there. Come on, I'm grammar police there.
Yes.
I'm with him. I think it could happen.
LA Kings, the year they won the Stanley Cup, of course, we all remember they were the 8th seed in the Western Conference. They had a horrible first half to the season, and then they caught on. You know, they're 6th in the Western Conference right now, but they have obviously a great coach in Sutter. And again, much like the Blackhawks, they have all the elements. They've got great star power, they've got goaltending, they've got studs on defense. 7-3-0 in their last 10. Hey, they've lost 2 in a row, but much like the Blackhawks, they can take it up to the next level come the postseason.
And arguably the best goalie in the league in Jonathan Quick, one of the top 3.
And again, like the Blackhawks, we're doing a lot of comparing on this show. Having that Stanley Cup experience is so invaluable. You look at teams fighting to get into the playoffs and look at how many Stanley Cup rings they have in their room. Quite often, it's none or very few. The LA Kings, they know what it takes to win.
Yeah, Jonathan Quick, wow, what a save there on Brouwer when Brouwer went between the legs. It's going to be very interesting. And remember, the Stanley Cup regular season, we're talking 6 days from now. It will be crystal clear. We will know all the matchups. And again, it could come down to that final Sunday, Phoenix and Dallas fighting it out. New Jersey, they're still alive. They've got a game tonight against Calgary. We'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow. I can guarantee you that. I'll be back in the chair at Hockey Night, at David Amber, at Hockey Brophy, #Hockey Night. Facebook as well, Hockey Night in Canada. Brophy, have fun?
Oh, always have fun.
All right, it's good to have you along. We'll see you next time right here, Hockey Night Online.